Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Chelsea Hansen. Today I want to talk to you about how you know when to fire your child's therapist. I offer my expertise in a few support groups, both here locally in South Florida as well as globally online. And I asked parents to tell me about incidents with therapists, either with bad advice or experiences that they had that were negative, so that I could share with you how to prevent that from happening with your children. What I found after I received hundreds of responses and private messages and conversations with parents is that the overwhelming majority of parents that I have talked with believe that the therapist is an authority figure and they have to defer to the therapist even after incidents occurred that were not positive for their child. I found that parents find it very difficult to advocate for their kids with these therapists because they think that the therapist knows best. And I'm here to tell you that that's not true. There's no one who is a greater expert on your child than you. It's good to have a team of therapists in place. I'm a psychologist and we have a bunch of therapists for our children have gone through speech therapy, occupational therapy, feeding therapy, ABA therapy, pivotal response treatment, which is derived from ABA, social skills therapy. We've gone through a lot, and we have excellent therapists in place for our kids. But we've also had some not so excellent therapists that we have had to fire over the years. And I want you to have the mindset that you are a CEO of a company whose mission is to help your child make progress and be the best that they can be, and to make great strides in whatever areas that you find important. And if you're the CEO, you want the best team that you can get. You want excellence. And I want you to have that mindset because you are in control. You are in the driver's seat when it comes to your child's treatment. So here are 5 reasons to fire your child's therapist. The first reason is if you don't like them. If you get a bad feeling from a therapist, if you just don't like their energy, if you feel that they're negative in some way, trust your gut. You are the gatekeeper for every single person who comes through to interact with your child. Do not let anyone through that you don't feel great about. If you have a bad feeling that's coming from somewhere, trust your gut and move on. I have so many therapists that I love, some of whom may be watching this video, but I have to share with you that therapists are a dime a dozen. There are so many therapists to choose from. So it's really important that you find one that is a great fit, not only for your child, but for you as well, that you feel is going to make great strides with your child. The second reason to fire a therapist is if your child doesn't like them. So it's okay for your child to have some reluctance at first if perhaps they're being challenged appropriately by the therapist. That's okay. But what's not okay is if they never want to go to therapy, if they don't enjoy the therapist at all, and the therapist and the child just are not bonding over, you've given it a few sessions and it just doesn't seem to be a fit. Trust your child. Our kids can't always communicate why they don't like someone or what specifically isn't right, but we need to trust their instincts. So if your child doesn't like the therapist, it's time for them to go. The third reason to fire your child's therapist is if they tell you that you can't go into a session. You should always go into sessions with your children. If you take them to speech therapy, occupational therapy, ABA, whatever it is, you should always be permitted to be in the session. Sometimes therapists will say things like, oh, children act different if mom or dad are around, so we like to work with them one-on-one. That's fine that that's your preference, but as a mom, I have every right to be in the session, and I don't leave my children alone with strangers. I just don't. And as a psychologist, I know that children may act differently when mom or dad are around, but that typically goes away after a few sessions. They get used to it. We're kind of in the corner. We're not involved in the session, but we're there observing, and that's important for 2 reasons. The first is that it's critically important for us to know what's going on in the sessions. For safety reasons, you can't trust everyone. It's the sad fact. You can't trust everyone. They might be the nicest person in the world, but if you don't know 100% what's going on in there, for me, I wouldn't feel comfortable. But the second reason that is something that is overlooked is for parent training. If you are in every session of speech therapy, occupational therapy, whatever it is, you are learning so much from those therapists. Hopefully you find an excellent therapist and you never have to fire them, but you're getting that parent training so you know what to do at home. You can take those exact same strategies and implement them in your home, and your child is going to make progress even faster. So if a therapist tells you that you can't go in, that's not a great sign. There's one exception. For feeding therapy, we went to Nova Southeastern University, which has one of the best feeding clinics in the world with Dr. Roseanne Lisak, and they have a two-way mirror. So even though you may not be in the room at all times, you observe the whole time. And it's excellent. You can see exactly what's going on. So even if you're not in the room, you're still seeing the session. You're getting the parent training for safety reasons. You know exactly what's going on. And that is the only exception in my opinion. If you prefer not to go into your child's therapy sessions, that's fine. I don't agree with that, but that's fine. It's just completely different when the therapist says that you can't go in. So I've had that happen. Therapists have told me that they don't allow parents in sessions, and I've said, that's fine, this just isn't a fit for us then. And then we don't go there, but usually they just say, oh, well, okay, as long as you don't interfere. Again, they work for us. They don't make these decisions. We do. The fourth reason you should fire your child's therapist is if they don't share your vision for your child. You should have a vision for your child of what you want them to be able to do. Maybe it's a life skill. Maybe it has to do with language acquisition. Maybe it has to do with something specific with gross motor skills. Whatever it is, maybe your child is extremely high functioning and you believe that your child should be able to be in mainstream classes, or whatever the case may be. You have goals for your child. You have dreams for your child and a vision. And I want every single therapist that is part of the treatment team for your child to share that vision. If you have a therapist who's consistently negative and telling you what your child can't do, that's not a good fit, and you need to find a different therapist. Okay, it's okay if you have, really big goals and they may not share those goals, but you're going to feel disheartened every single time you talk about that. I want your child to have therapists that share those same dreams and believe in your child, and they're positive and they want to collaborate. It's like, okay, you have this goal for your child. Well, here's what we can do to get there. Here's a roadmap. Here's how I can help your child. And that's what you need. You do not need any naysayers who are involved. You don't need people to tell you what your child can't do. One of the questions that I asked parents in the support groups is, what are some of the things that people have told you that your child can't do, or some of the negative feedback you've gotten from therapists? And the responses were just devastating. There were parents who told me that doctors, various types, neurologists, psychologists, etc., told them that their child should be institutionalized, which is something that only until a few decades ago, that's actually what happened to kids on the spectrum. They were put in institutions, and their mothers were told that it was because of cold parenting on the mother's end, and that's the cause of autism, but your child will be better off without you in this institution. That was truly the belief system not all that long ago. And unfortunately, the mother who told me this was just recently. Someone told her that her child should be institutionalized. Another mom replied, and a therapist had told her that she should not have any more children because they would most likely be autistic, and autistic children would ruin her life later. This is an actual therapist saying this. So imagine that type of negativity and dealing with that every single time when you just want help for your child. You do not have to go through that. If your child's therapist is constantly telling you all of this stuff and they have this, catastrophic mindset that your child is never going to make progress or they'll never do this or that, they have to go. We had a speech therapist when Olivia was little, she was about 3 at the time, who told me that she may never have conversations because at the time she was really echolalic, meaning she would just repeat back what we said. And she has conversations all day, every day. She's 7 now, it's not been that long. She has a lot of conversations. And we knew that therapist was not going to be part of our child's treatment team because she didn't believe in Olivia, and therefore we cut her loose. The 5th reason to fire your child's therapist is if there is a traumatic incident. And this is where it really comes into play that you need to trust your gut. You need to trust your instincts. If something has happened with a therapist that is not okay, don't justify it. Don't make excuses for the therapist. If something happened, it's time for that therapist to go. As I said, there are many therapists out there. So as an example, we actually went through a traumatic incident with an ABA, an applied behavior analysis therapist. We had 2 therapists working with Olivia, and I had a lot of reluctance about this because I actually used to be an ABA therapist, and I don't really believe in traditional ABA. After some of the things that I saw, I was working in children's homes with them, and some of the techniques from ABA I did not agree with. Now, there is a more progressive way of doing ABA, and we believe in PRT, pivotal response training, which is derived from ABA and is more progressive. But traditional ABA has kind of a difficult past, and there are some techniques that are inhumane and unacceptable. And we unfortunately had an incident related to this. We had a great ABA therapist. She's wonderful. We still are in communication with her today, and she's a great person. She is a lot more progressive, and she would never have done anything to harm Olivia. She had a supervisor at the time who was a lot more traditional in his approach, and right from the start, I didn't feel comfortable with him. And this is where I failed my daughter. I did not feel comfortable with him. But because we couldn't get rid of him without losing the great therapist who was actually working with Olivia, he was just a supervisor working with the therapist, we did not cut him loose because we didn't want to lose this other therapist. So one day, this was actually on Valentine's Day of last year, he came over to train our ABA therapist, who is wonderful. So he was training her, and he had a lot more interaction with Olivia than I would have preferred. And at one point, she was exhibiting avoidance behavior, meaning she was trying to leave the room to get out of the task that they were trying to have her do. And to prevent her from leaving the room, this male therapist, who is probably about 35 and tall, and Olivia is not particularly comfortable with men other than her dad, so it was just a weird fit, held Olivia on his lap against her will. Now, thankfully, my husband and I do not leave our children alone with therapists, so we were in the same room and we could see what was going on. And Olivia said, "Put me down. I want to have a break in my room. Put me down." And he continued to hold her on his lap. So my husband and I came across the room to him, and my husband said, "Put her down." And he still held Olivia on his lap as my husband told him to put her down. So my husband said, "Let her go, get her off of your lap," very firmly. And he finally let her go. She was crying, ran to her room, and I was so devastated. I was in complete shock. And the crazy thing is I know that he did not have negative intentions at all. This was a traditional ABA strategy because in his mind, she was exhibiting avoidance behavior and therefore she had to be restrained. It was so unacceptable that we were completely floored, and Olivia was so upset. We had a play date later that day. She was really not herself at this play date, and it was a shame because it was Valentine's Day. We had a bunch of fun plans. So I just felt sick to my stomach. The session ended. My husband was with my daughter, and I confronted the therapist, and the great therapist who we like was in the room at the same time, and I actually started crying. And I said, "You might follow these type of rules that you read about in a textbook, but this is my child's life. She's verbal, and she told you that she wanted a break and she wanted to get off of your lap, and you continued to hold her and restrain her against her will. That's unacceptable. That's not something that we're going to allow you to do." And he was like, "Well, she was trying to avoid, and that's our strategy." And he kind of tried to explain himself. And I was very emotional, but I was extremely firm. And I just explained that that's completely unacceptable. And I looked over and the therapist who we love was crying. She was tearing up. I saw her wiping her eyes because Olivia was so distraught and it was so obviously the wrong move. I thank God that we were there. We don't leave our children alone with therapists. The female therapist who was there, we know her a little bit better, so we might be in the next room. We're always in earshot. But when he came, we were always in the same room and we were watching him the whole time because we did not get a good feeling from him from the start. So we did not follow the advice that I'm giving in this video. I have learned from this mistake. And while I didn't want to lose the great therapist that Olivia loved, I should have cut him loose anyway. We didn't like him. Olivia didn't like him. And then we had a traumatic incident. So what did I do after that? I'm a little bit embarrassed to tell you that the session ended. So after that traumatic incident, the session was over. Olivia wasn't going to be anywhere near him. He and I had had words. We had an exchange. And I just thought about it and thought about it and thought about it. And I just did not want to lose our original therapist. So my husband and I talked, and this male therapist only came once a week, and it was supposed to be to observe Olivia's therapist. It was not supposed to be to directly interact with Olivia at all. So he came back. It pains me to say that because he never should have entered our house again after this point. He came back and my husband had a very firm conversation with him. He told him that he is in no way to have any interaction with Olivia at all, and he should be across the room or preferably in another room observing the therapist because that was his job, was to supervise her. And he explained, you know, we want to keep working with her. Olivia has a great rapport with her, but we don't want you to have any interaction with her at all because you've destroyed any type of rapport you had and it was traumatizing. So he continued to come, but he didn't interact with Olivia after that. You know, he may have said hi to her. If it was, you know, comfortable with her, they'd have a little back and forth, but never hands on her again. And we firmly told them that, you know, you don't ever put hands on our child. So that was so traumatic that I took Olivia later, a couple months after that. She was having anxiety, which was not a result from this incident. She'd been having anxiety before, but I took her to a psychologist for some talk therapy. And the psychologist asked her if anything has ever happened that was traumatic, and she used words that Olivia understood. And Olivia brought that up. She brought up that therapy appointment where the therapist held her against her will, and that she had used the words that she was supposed to use. And she had asked for the break that she was supposed to ask for. There are amazing therapists out there for our kids. There are fantastic people who will be on your child's team, who want your child to win. They want to help you. They want to help your child. And your child should have fun. Every therapy session should be fun. In speech therapy, they get to play games, they get to read books, they talk about interesting topics, whatever they're into. In speech therapy, that's what they should be doing. In occupational therapy, they get their wiggles out, they play with sensory toys. So they're doing some work, and it's okay that sometimes there's some work involved, but they should love their therapist. They should be so excited to see that therapist. And you should enjoy it too. If there is a therapist that you dread seeing every week, or that your child is asking you, do I really have to go? Then you need to explore that. You need to find the best of the best for your child, and don't stop until you have that excellent team. That team where every single one of those therapists is playing an integral part of your child's progress. And if not, why are they there? The therapist is not in charge. You are. You need to advocate for your child. Make sure that if you're at all concerned about a therapist, that you really explore that and trust yourself. Trust your gut. Do not listen to people who don't know your child as well as you do. You can seek advice from all these experts, and that's fine, that's encouraged. I want you to do that. But you know what's right for your child. And if something doesn't feel right, if it feels off at all, Don't justify that. Don't minimize it. I hope this was helpful to you. If it was, please subscribe to my channel, give this video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next video.